Right, let us bring in our next guest. Our next guest is going to be talking about direct democracy. And I don't know enough about it, but I'm going to find out more right now because I think it's important too. And it's about giving people options here, right? So let's see. Neil, are you there? Let's see.
Yes, can
Neil.
you hear me?
Yes, there he is. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good to have you, Neil Petrie, everybody from Direct Democracy. And it's funny, Neil, because we are having in the run up to the election, we're allowing independent candidates to come on. We just had two independent candidates from Scotland, and they started talking about direct democracy. I said, we've got Neil Petrie coming on after you, who will literally talk about this subject. So, talk to people about direct democracy, Neil. Talk to us about referendum and recall and what it all means, and what are you running?
Right, the direct democracy movement is really about getting referendums regularly for British people. We base it around the one we're looking at anyway, is the Swiss system, and you have a variety of ways of getting your voice heard, basically under the Swiss type of direct democracy. So you'll have referendums where there are mandatory ones on constitutional issues, for instance, that the people decide they want to have mandatory referendums on, say joining an international organization. And then you'll have optional ones where, when laws were coming out of Parliament in Switzerland, for instance, every time that law comes out, the people have an option to carry out a referendum on it. So, if you get 1% of the voting public to sign up to your rejection of that law or an amendment to it, then you'll get a first past the post referendum. So you get that decision on every law if you want it. Doesn't happen all the time.
That could change everything because the problem is, Neil, I don't need to tell you this. People are politically homeless. They are completely disenfranchised with the political system. Hardly anybody trusts anything that we believe, whether that is Assange being released or whatever. Like, the world stage has become a farce. Nobody knows who to believe or who to trust. But what we do know categorically is don't trust leading politicians because they're all globalists. So there's a problem there right off the bat. And I saw a video that was sent to me, Graeme MacArthur, talking about the biggest legal scandal in history. How does direct democracy have anything to do with this? And tell us about that video.
Yeah, well, I only saw this yesterday as well. And basically, what was sent to me was a short clip, and believe it or not, it was David Cameron in 2009 saying that we should have local and national referenda. He actually said this just before he got into power, of course. Now, what it appears to be is this Graeme MacArthur, who I'd not heard of before. Well, I think I'd seen him on Richard Vogue's once. That was it, sometime quite recently. But basically, Graham had put together a case for getting referenda in Wales. He was looking particularly at Wales. Now, the what happened, he then got this put forward through the Conservative Party, through Open Europe. He was trying to get this position, where you could have referenda in Britain, in Wales in particular. And this was fed back into the Conservative Party in 2009. So that's why Cameron came out with this statement. But shortly after, Graham was imprisoned for a fracas, which he's still disputing. However, when he came out, he made the point, and he went to visit with the head of the Conservative Party in Wales, a Lord Bourne, and he put this case to Lord Bourne that we should have this system. And what he found out was they were just really trying to find out what he was doing, and they then put together this petition process because they were in power by 2010. And then they put together, if you'll remember, the petitions, 100,000 for this and 1 million for that. And that is basically what he had proposed to them. But it was not referenda. These were not things that we could call forward as a proper referendum. They were just petitions to government. So they defanged what he had, presumably because he'd been in prison. So I think this is the issue that you've got. But he's obviously got the case that this was mishandled. His case was mishandled, and the head of the prosecution service at the time was Starmer. So it all gets a bit mucky, and you've got, Starmer involved with something that is a bit of a scandal with this case. You've got direct democracy is the kind of the issue that then gets dropped from the agenda, despite the fact that David Cameron had said, we'll not only have, the referendum with Brexit later on. Prior to that, he'd promised referendums at local and national level, but that got scrubbed from the history. Yeah.
How I think that's fascinating. I think that's absolutely fascinating, not least obviously because David Cameron has been brought back as the foreign minister and he was made a lord in order to be able
Yeah.
to do that. So that in itself, I think, is really curious and very interesting. And obviously, Sir Keir Starmer, is obviously almost certainly going to be the prime minister next week. And so I do think that that is curious and that is interesting. But here's the thing, is that direct democracy doesn't only have to be used for political decisions, does it?
No, I mean, direct democracy, it's a system of allowing the people to speak. And it could be on a variety of issues, And for instance, they have town hall meetings in America still where the town votes on, certain aspects, bylaws, local issues. And they don't have to be laws, as you said. You could use it generically. And in fact, we've helped a guy who's developing a thing called Block Vote, which is a voting application that is blockchain enabled. And that allows people to vote on it, and you can put whatever type of vote you really want on there. But because it's blockchain enabled, it's highly secure because this is the type of thing that obviously the banks use for transferring money around. And so from the point of view of security, it's better than the government system. However, it's not necessarily going to be required for direct democracy. The Swiss don't use technical means, but if people want to use technical means and they're acceptable, then there you go. You've got a blockchain enabled one that's being trialed right now by Richard Borner at blockvote.org. So yeah, you can use it for a variety of things. The other thing the Swiss use, Sonia, is they use a referendum called it's the initiative, so that you could come forward and put forward your own proposal for a new law. So you've got the laws coming out of Parliament, but you've also got this option because obviously not all parties want to tell us everything
Right,
we want to
right.
hear. So when we can turn around in Switzerland anyway and say we want a law on this, whatever it might be, the ECHR, House of Lords, whatever you want to have as a law, get rid of it or change it. And that can be done in Switzerland. So you've got those various options, but you definitely can make up one that you want as a citizen, as an individual.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let me refer to some comments here. Mama Bear says they won't allow us to have multiple referendums. It would give the people too much power. So, and I think that's a fair point. I think many people listening to this are saying, yeah, this is great. This is very nice in theory, but how would it really pan out in reality?
Right. You're correct in terms of, and your viewer there. The reality is that this is not going to be easy, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. It's true that this is it's a tough task. However, if you want something that's really worthwhile, you've got to put some effort in, don't you? That's the reality. And it's the same with this. We've got powerful
Right,
interests against us,
right.
as we saw there with Cameron offering it and then pulling it off the agenda. And in fact, 2 years before that, the Conservative Party had about 30 odd MPs who were pushing for a Swiss style system, including Michael Gove, Kwasi Kwarteng, Priti Patel. So, they've been pushed, but they've done nothing. So what I did was I worked closely with getting involved with reform simply because Nigel Farage was in charge. And I personally handed him my book, One Vote Away, which covers this. And the aim was to get a powerful figure who's outside of the centre to go forward with this idea. And we've got videos, many videos now, well, not many, but a good number of Nigel backing direct democracy and calling for this reform. So he sees three major reforms that he wants to implement. It's PR, the electoral process, House of Lords, abolishing it or dealing with it, whatever the people want, and then also referenda on those important issues that the people want to call them on from us, not from the system, but from the bottom up. And that's it. If you get that in place, Sonia, like you said, it changes everything.
It could change everything.
It will.
Potentially, it could. Let me read you this from Healing the Silence. So many people in the UK submit a petition on the daily, and many don't get the airtime it deserves. A lot of the time, petitions are just a waste of time, aren't they?
Well, personally, there are means of getting something done, but
They do raise
actually,
awareness or
that's what.
attention to situations,
Yeah.
yes.
And what they've done is they've made it easier for us to come forward with the direct democracy proposal where people can back people who are proposing we actually have the full-blooded system, not just going to Parliament and begging them to, do what we're asking, but for us to go to them and tell them this is what you're going to do now. This is one of the advantages of direct democracy in the Swiss system. And Taiwan uses this, by the way, national level, and Estonia. They've got a fully electronic version, actually.
Right.
I can tell you a bit more about that. That's interesting in a second as well. But yes, it's difficult, but it's being done. We've got an MP now, Andrew Bridgen, supports direct democracy. On his own website, he's got a page there called The Solution. it's about direct democracy.
Interesting.
Again, I handed in my book. So the two people I've actually handed my book to in politics have both gone for this.
That is
Nigel was the first.
interesting.
So I think, once you know it's there and you're outside of the centre, you know it's the way to go because
Yeah.
people will be heard.
Fran G is actually in Switzerland. She
Oh,
says, we
lovely.
take many referendums here in Switzerland, but in the end, the establishment gets their way. Don't like the sound of that, right?
No,
And Graeme MacArthur has joined us, who we're discussing, saying, hi, Sonia, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. I'd be delighted to do an interview for you. Please get in touch. You'll find something extraordinary if you look into this. I found it curious, Graeme. I was absolutely, and Aaron, who had sent it to me, I said, can Neil come on tomorrow? And because I just thought this is an interesting one. I find this very interesting. So Neil, before you leave us, as we said, you can use the block vote for many things, and one of the things it's being used for at the moment, obviously, is to do with what I believe absolutely is a miscarriage of justice, that of Clive Freeman. We've covered the story in detail on this stream. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Clive Freeman was basically put inside for a murder long ago, well over 30 years ago, and but he always claimed he was innocent, and he's taken that through the system where he could have been released 20 plus years ago, and he's
Yes.
still inside because he will not admit to his guilt. So he's obviously he feels very strongly about this for obvious reasons that he's not guilty. The pathology reports show that it was not what some was said at the time of the trial. So he's got a huge amount of evidence he should be released. But it's another mess by the criminal justice system, and including these review systems that the government have in place. So we put together a vote, or with Aaron and Richard Borner and other supporters of Clive who are trying to get him out and to get him released. He's in his 80s. He's not well. He's stuck inside because he's got principles, and he will not, admit to his guilt when he's not guilty. So he's got quite a spine, and he's hanging on in there, and we're hopefully getting him out so he can enjoy, some freedom again.
We will put a link to your website in our description. And I believe we've also got, yes, we have. Thank you, Shin. Shin's already put it up in the live comments, which is fantastic. Neil, thank you so much for joining us this morning, giving us an outline of this. We very much appreciate it. Take good care of yourself. Hope it takes off. And what's this, Merv? It would be nice to be asked occasionally, but the establishment won't allow it because they know the answer. I know. And people are rightly cynical, Neil. We've all had enough, haven't we? We want it to change. We
Yeah,
absolutely want it to change, and we're so sick and tired about it. We really are. So listen, thank you so much, everybody. This is Neil Petrie. Thank you, Neil. Take good
thank
care of
you.
yourself. Have a great weekend.
And
Thanks for
you.
coming on and
Thanks, then. Bye
explaining.
bye. Bye,
Appreciate it.
Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.